So the last form of a linear equation is the one you should all be familiar with because it's the primary one that's taught in Algebra 1, and that is slope-intercept form. And this is the equation for slope-intercept form, so you can write this down on the tab. Y equals mx plus b. And just like the other forms, the m and the b are going to get filled in because all of the forms of linear equations end up having simply an x and a y in it. Those other variables stand for numbers that we're going to plug in. So let's talk about slope-intercept form and the many ways that we use it. We use it quite frequently. So let me go ahead and write in the equation again here at the bottom. So y equals mx plus b. There's my equation. Okay, so let's talk about recognizing first. Okay, because recognizing which form you're in is so important to being able to know what to do next. So one of the things you should recognize about slope-intercept form is the y is all by itself on one side of the equation. There is nothing else and no other form of a linear equation that has a y by itself. This one has y minus y1. So still doesn't have y by itself. And this one has x and y together. So the only form that has y by itself is slope-intercept. That's how you'll recognize it. There are also no parentheses. Parentheses are only on point-slope form. Okay? Now, the other variables in the equation, the m and the b, stand for something. The m stands for the same thing that it did in point-slope form. It's the coefficient of x is m, and that always represents the slope. And then the other variable is a b. The b is a constant term, which means there's no variable with it, it's just a number. And that number represents the y-intercept of a line, meaning that if you were to graph it, it's the place where the line crosses the y-axis. Okay? That's what it represents. Okay? So let's talk about converting to slope-intercept form. Converting to slope-intercept form is very, very nice because in slope-intercept form, graphs can be done very simply and very easily, okay? So let's just practice converting. So if you look at this first number right here, or this first equation, you should be able to tell that there's parentheses on the right side. And the y is on the left and the x is on the right. So this is in point-slope form. And we're now going to convert it to slope-intercept. And the only way I'm going to do that is by getting the y by itself. But before I can do that, I'm going to have to distribute this right side to get rid of the parentheses because slope-intercept form has no parentheses. So let's go ahead and distribute it. So if I do 1/2 times x, I'm going to get 1/2 x. 1/2 of -4 is simply -2. And from here, the only thing I have to do to get this in slope-intercept form is to get rid of this 1 and add it over here with the -2 so the y is alone. So I'm going to get 1/2 x minus 1 for my slope-intercept form. So pretty easy. This equation over here, you should be able to tell, is in standard form. And standard form can also be converted to slope-intercept form, just again by trying to get the y alone. So if I'm going to get the y alone, I got to move this x term to the right side. So I get 2y equals, and I'm going to put the x term first, which is a -3x, and then the y-intercept of the b is going to be -1. And then my last step in order to get this in slope-intercept form is to divide off the 2. But you got to be careful because it has to divide with both of the terms. Why did I not have to add 1 when I added to both terms? Well, that's because when you add, you can only add things that are like terms. This is an x term. This +1 doesn't have an x in it. So I'm only adding it to the number, okay? Over here, I'm dividing, and dividing you have to divide from both because there's no rule about having to have like terms to divide. So in this example, -3/2 is just going to stay -3/2. It's okay for the slope to be a fraction. And then the -1/2. Now I'm not graphing this. This would be kind of ugly to graph, but right now I'm just simply writing an equation that's in slope-intercept form. This equation tells me that the -1/2 is the y-intercept and the slope is -3/2. This equation tells me that the -1 is the y-intercept and the slope is 1/2. But I'm not asked to graph those, I'm just asked to put them in slope-intercept form. Now I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to get another video started where we will graph in slope-intercept form, because that's the easiest way to graph.